Hi, everybody. This is the video lecture for the mediatization and other big theories part of the course. Okay, so before we go to theories, I want you to just think in your head, what role does traditional media, which is sometimes called legacy media, mass media, and very often signifies journalistic media, what role does it play in the era of disinformation? Is it amplifying something? Is it fixing something? Is it a solution to something? Or is it a problem? Because that's the central question for this course as well. What is media and how does it play into the info disorder that we are experiencing right now? Because there must be something that the journalists, the media houses, the journalistic media system these days, and the entertainment industry, because it's not just journalism, right? What are they doing that amplifies or negotiates, kind of like takes away the stress of information disorders? I have some answers, and we will learn some of these answers in this course, but very many answers are yet to be discovered, are yet to be discussed, are yet to be argued over. Because very often we focus on what role does social media play in this, social networking sites, platform media, shared media, social media sites, whatever we call it. And this is more prominent discussion. It's a question of, so did social media break our societies? And sometimes the answer is yes, it did a little bit. Human beings are not evolving very quickly, so we stay the same, but the platforms are amplifying something in us and in our culture that is harmful to societies. So social media, traditional media, all sorts of media, they have a role to play in our society's advancements, regressions, and everything else. You can pause this video and just think for a moment. What do you think? Like, how big is the media's role in it? Social media? Journalistic media? What are they doing enough of? And what is missing from the picture? Because these points of ponderings could also be the start point for your intervention, which is the final task of this course as well. If you can think of a problem that is so clear to you that is related to media and disinformation and information disorder, then you surely have ideas how to fix it. Tiny things, not the big ones like the media system has to change, but like how could we do this in like tiny bits and pieces. But yeah, today I will talk to you about 4 big theories that are very popular among, not popular, popular is the wrong word, but they are very known and very much used, and they have explanatory power to tell what it is that I'm witnessing here. There is also the 600-page book added to the Moodle course about media effects, because this is one of the core text, the ground block of media studies. We very often talk about like what effect does media have on people. So today I will talk about some things that might be familiar to many of you. People who have a sociology background, people who have a media background. You might know these already, or psychology. But I will just go over them quickly so that if you have never heard of them, you're good to go. because this is the baseline for this course, and we kind of want you to know about these things. The first concept, the first theory that has moved to the vernacular use as well. And vernacular use means that people are using this in their discussions, in, you know, like normal people talks. So framing, in Estonian, it's raamistamine. But framing theory is actually pretty old and well established. It's related to many different theories that have their own names, like agenda setting theory. But framing is, it's used as a theory, but it's used also as a verbal concept. And basically it means that the choices that we make when we introduce some kind of event or a thought, there is like lots and lots of choices. What words am I going to use? How am I going to deliver this message? What is going to be the visual of it? What's going to be the language of it? What kind of discourses do I go into? Like, how do I talk about this thing? And framing theory says that all of these options, all of these choices, conscious and unconscious, they not determine, but they have an effect on how people are viewing the thing itself. So, for example, we might have a phone. Let's take a very, common object. We might have a phone, and I might show this to you like in a really good lighting and surrounded with happy people who are like, yay, hi mom, oh, how are you doing? Everybody's happy. There are violins on the background, and not like beep, but rather like happy violins on the background. And the object seems to be the source of happiness then. But I could frame this differently. I could have this lit in like really dark and ominous way. I could be in a zombie mode, just like sped up. I'm stuck here for hours, just scrolling. There's this dark undertone to it. And then the object looks very different. So this is a very simple example of framing. But gentler forms of framing are present everywhere, and they are normal part, like an everyday mundane part of communication. Because whatever we talk about, we always frame things in a certain way. So, for example, a child breaks a cup, and the parent comes in and is like, what happened here? And the child is like, I didn't do it. I swear I didn't do it. It wasn't my fault. That's framing, right? Or let's continue with the parent role. So if I'm talking to my child and I'm being like very, talking about the facts of life and how things are in life, then I'm taking on the parenting discourse of me teaching you how life works. And it's a very different setting from the fun, playful mom that I can also be. Or if we have a journalist who has limited information about something and they decide to kind of talk about the whole thing from a legal point of view. Legal point of view is a framework because legally things might be really okay, but from a moral framing, they might not be. Or, just like point of view is also framing. TikTok is full of POV videos and other platforms too. So these are all framings as well. And framing theory is not even a theory anymore, in that sense that we are just accepted that this is a thing that we do. And it's a concept that is widely used. So here we have just like several screenshots of different things that I have just gone and grabbed. For example, the crab invading the Mediterranean. And here we have this blue crab picture. Like, what is the word here? Invasion, right? It could have been something else. And part of noticing the framing is asking questions about what else could have been here. What other words could have been used? What other visuals could have been used? Is this the whole story? For example, Truss spends billions to cap soaring energy bills. We have the word spending, we have the word soaring energy bills. They are all frames. Also, price of war. UK and EU throw billions at energy subsidies. So the frame of throw is really like a strong verbal frame here. And often in social media, you have news media, for example, like Delphi, and there is this news piece that seems to be really like based on factual. Cristiano Ronaldo does not allow their 12-year-old son to use the smartphone. So it's just, stating something that is happening. But the accompanying text here is a model parent and the clapping hands. So this is most definitely framing this as a positive thing. It could have been framed otherwise. Delphi could have put there cutting their child off from the world. That's a different frame for the same thing, right? And here are, just you can find these frames everywhere. And I invite you to think about these and notice these everywhere you go. The second big media theory that is widely used and very popular is cultivation theory. And cultivation theory is one of the core arguments whenever somebody says that media is at fault of something. So cultivation theory says that if some sort of messages or some sorts of frames are being used repetitively, they are repeated in different forms, but the main message stays the same, then people get influenced by this. And the influence could go so far as to change their whole worldview or shape their worldview to be, whatever the media text, the repeating media message is. So here we see very often that violent media births violent people. So if a child grows up looking at exclusively only violent movies, video games, and so on, they could be influenced by this. They could be desensitized by this, and violence becomes a normal thing for them. And some argue that this translates into actual actions of people, but that should be taken with a grain of salt. Because whenever we hear things like Grand Theft Auto makes children really violent and, gun violence stems from that. There are many scholars that argue with this, that we are saying that video games influence behavior. And we're seeing that, there's A and there's B and there's this connection between them. When in actuality, it could be that there is an invisible thing, a moderating value that actually holds the most importance. For example, it is relatively well proven that children who have less social support and weaker family ties are very often addicted, so-called addicted to technology. They spend huge amounts of unsupervised media time in online settings. and they become, more delinquent or violent in some ways. And then the video game is not the thing that makes the child violent, but rather the surrounding upbringing. The fact that they have no role models, they have no parents available to them, they have an extremely hostile home situation, they are growing up in places where nobody cares and takes care of them. So these could be so much more important than the fact that they are playing a certain video game. So this is the kind of the argument that goes around cultivation theory and video games, for example. But for sure, there is this huge media effect that is really hard to measure, that stems from cultivation theory. And mediatization, that we come to a bit later, stems also from cultivation theory. The thought that media has a power over people. We start to believe things that we see in media. We trust media in that sense. Like cultivation theory is really well observable in children and fairy tales, for example. The belief that evil gets punished and the good guys win. Yeah, especially guys. It's very gendered. This is coming from media, because fairy tales, books are also, cartoons are also media. So children have this innate belief that being bad doesn't pay off. And this carries on to our adulthood as well. For example, rape myths very often rely on the just world hypothesis. It's one of the cognitive biases of our brain that makes us think that things don't just happen, but things have to have a reason. And, just world, bad things happen to bad people. So in rape myths, it's if you get raped, it's your own fault. Obviously not, right? Don't take this out of context. But the horrible rape myth is actually built on the same building block that comes from cultivation theory. We learn from Hollywood movies, from fairy tales, from folk tales that are being told as, these kind of cautionary tales, that bad people get, in the end, the punishment, and good people will prevail. This story works really well, and it comes from media as well, from the stories that we tell ourselves via media. So here is also the whole section of body image. Where does it come from? Why do we sometimes dislike our noses, our toes, our asses, whatever? And media representations and the very narrow representations have cultivated these unachievable stereotypes or like goals in our heads, and they are all tied to cultivation theories as well. Then here we also see the backfire effect as a subcategory. So people have said that if you want to avoid more harm to come from something horrible, you shouldn't talk about this in the media. Because if you talk about like a cautionary thing in the media, like, oh my God, this is horrible, this happened, there is this propaganda narrative moving around, the media shouldn't talk about this because it will have a backfire effect. It will basically, come and reinforce existing beliefs and make this information more available, and people will just, be provoked into this backfire effect, and start to believe more in this misconception that media has tried to debunk, for example. But different empirical studies have said that backfire effect is actually not that clear cut. It doesn't really work like that. And media actually perhaps should still cover problematic topics as well and talk about the crazy things that people believe and so on. But still, we have to take this again with a grain of salt, because our mushy brains will only remember keywords and not the whole story. We will just remember that we saw something in the news, but we will not remember, was it debunked? Did they say that this is wrong? Like, did they get to the court? Were they admitted? Were they guilty? We don't remember the details. We just remember something. Third theory is selective exposure theory. And selective exposure theory is very popular when we talk about filter bubbles, echo chambers, all of that stuff. Because selective exposure theory tells us that we always choose the information. We choose the information and we choose to believe the information that falls in line with our existing media world, our existing value system, our existing knowledge base. So it's actually really hard to get people believing, accepting new knowledge. And it's stemming from psychology, because our brains want to avoid cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is, when you believe that things are like that, but then the world comes at you and says that nope, things are like that. So then something has to give. Either you will believe that, okay, I was wrong and the world is right, or you will believe that, nope, the world is wrong and I have been right. Conspiracy theories are built on that. So we tend to give more weight and favor the information that reinforces our pre-existing views or attitudes or core beliefs. And we start to avoid contradicting information. So that's why, if you're a very strong believer of a certain worldview or a political party, you will probably hang out more in online forums that have similar minded people. You will not voluntarily spend, open-minded discussions and your time in the polar opposite of that worldview. So that's why we kind of clump into these echo chambers, and we will build the walls around these echo chambers harder and stronger in online societies and online forums even more, because it's so much easier to do that. It is a technological affordance that we can kick out everybody who doesn't think like that. We can mute them, we can delete them. But when you think about like a physical community, you would have 100 people living in a village. 50 of them would think one way, 50 of them would think the other way, but they would still have to hang out because they were married to each other and they were working at the same places and so on. So you couldn't really kick anyone out. So you had to endure them, and you had to find ways to be like civil about it. But technologically mediated communities very often function a little bit differently. The need is different there. Need to belong is always there, but social media has done something here with us. And you can study this, for example, in some of your homeworks. The fourth big one is a mediatization theory. Nowadays, there is the theory of deep mediatization, which goes even deeper. But mediatization as a concept refers to how contemporary technologies and these augmentations of ourselves, these media technologies, have changed our perception and our practices that we do, how we do things in the world. So mediatization is very well very well illustrated by how we dress, how we present ourselves to the world. Even if it's not mainstream, even if it's like a subcultural thing, there are still these taste choices, how you present yourself to the world, that is mediatized. You have seen it in YouTube videos, in online lectures. Like, I am imitating, I'm always imitating people. And how do I know what to imitate? Media. Also, organizations are behaving differently because of mediatization. Like, schools have to think about what looks good in the media, how to get newsworthiness to their whatever they're doing, how to talk to journalists, how to make things look appetizing for media coverage. Not only schools, obviously. I don't know. Every company has to think about this. Mediatization is something much bigger, of course. It's called a meta process. It's one of the big whales, you know, the globalization and commercialization and individualization and all of these kinds of words. But mediatization tries to describe how our everyday life has been organized by what we have seen the media do, or the latest media developments. So there are several examples, which we will talk along the way as well. But here is just one thing that I think you should know if you don't know it yet. It's the deep mediatization and mediatization are part of this huge, like, waves of media and environmental kind of technological innovations. So we have seen 4 waves so far. 5th one probably along the way coming. AI wave. Some people are theorizing that that could be the 5th wave. But first wave was mechanization, second one was electrification, then came digitalization, and now we're experiencing datafication. You can learn more from reading Hepp and Hasebrink, or just, you know, Google that thing. And Mediatization of Culture and Society, it's a really good book that I suggest to read if you're interested in that. But it is built on the assumption and also description of contemporary life where media is everywhere. It's this media's intrusive ubiquity, as it's been called. They are omnipresent. Like, you wake up with media, your phone is doing the day or whatever you have there, or it's a smartwatch, or it's an electronic watch. Some people still have the clocks too, but they are dying out breed. Um, of course, there's techno nostalgia and you know, turning away from technology. They will come as waves as well. But mostly, when we are describing contemporary life, we are seeing that it's really, really full of media. We leave data trails everywhere. Our data is being harvested all day long. We see advertisements, persuasions, propaganda messages everywhere we go, not just scrolling social media, but also when we watch TV, when we go to the news, when we listen to the radio, when we read the books, when we, I don't know, talk to our fridge or whatever smart devices we might have at hand. So media has become really, really intrusive and invisible. We have domesticated media. Media is like a normal part of many processes and practices that didn't have that media connection in like historical times. Not even historical. Like, some things have changed in the last 10 years as well. You can think now, what has changed in like 10 years or 20 years if you're older? What would have been unthinkable in like 10 years ago? Scrolling your phone while you're with your friend, having your earplugs on when you're talking to someone, taking your phone to the toilet, for example. these are like weird things that we have started to do that weren't the norm in, before time. So plus the fact that majority of everything that we know about the world, and we know a lot about the world compared to other generations, other media generations, is coming from media. Whether it's social media, journalistic media, or whatever kind of media, we know a lot of stuff about the media, but also the world through the media. And that has kind of like blurred the lines between what is real and what is the media representation of something. So think about how restaurants and cities have made themselves Instagrammable. There are these Instagrammable frames and, these places where you take pictures, and it's become this norm for this. I'm sure that you can figure out other examples how reality has adjusted to media reality. I'm very keen to talk about these things when we talk about media logic, for example, when we meet in a couple of weeks. So there are quantitative characteristics of mediatization, which means how much is there media? There's like so much media and devices and technologies. And then there are qualitative characteristics of mediatization, which means that what do we think as normal? How do we behave? How do we communicate? And what do we perceive as social life? Like, how do we know what is real and how things are happening? So, as has been stated quite some years ago already, we live our lives in the media and not just with the media. Media is not turning on TV and watching the news anymore. Media is something where we are representing ourselves, others are representing. I'm doing media right now, right? I'm not just teaching, I'm creating media. And at the same time, I am following the media logic. I'm trying to look okay for the camera. I'm trying to have slides that will have like colors here and there and some pictures and stuff like that. So, some decades ago, that was not the norm. You would not get colorful slides with seagulls yelling at you and stuff like that. So deep mediatization, if you're interested, you should read Hepp's book on that. There are 5 characteristics. It means, so 5, this huge kind of waves of thought, or just like descriptions that tell us that it's deep mediatization. When things are really differentiated, when things are really highly connected, when there is the omnipresence of media everywhere all the time, all day long. The rapid pace of innovation, where things are moving so fast, everything is changing so fast, new model, new innovation, and datafication. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you very soon. And yeah.